Now, when you've got a whole bunch of ripe tomatoes and you're not sure what to do with them, one of the best things you can do is make this really delicious, quick and easy tomato soup. It's wonderful to have when everybody's feeling a bit under the weather because you've eaten too much cheesecake. And you literally just need a mound of tomatoes like this. And you can see they're starting to kind of go off a bit, and this is what's great about this dish, is it's literally tomatoes that you wouldn't use for a salad because they're not great. You need a really hot pot for this. Now normally when people make tomato soup, they pour boiling water over the tomatoes and wait for the skin to come off and then skin it. And I've done that before and it makes it taste really great. But one day I just decided I was going to make soup without taking the skin off because I simply didn't have time. And then I blended it in the blender and you couldn't even taste that there were ever skins on the tomatoes. So it actually didn't matter. And it's so time consuming that, I don't actually think it's an issue. So you can take the skins off if you want to. Some people take the pips out. It just seems such a waste. Most of the tomato is gone by the time you've taken the skins off. By the time you've taken the skins off and taken the pips out, it's, as I say, an enormous waste. Some of it's just a little bit too brown. One or two of these are not as ripe as I'd like it to be. Now, the wonderful thing about this tomato, we know that when we cook tomatoes, we release a lot of the lycopene. Now, lycopene is part of the carotenoid family, of which beta-carotene is one of the brothers or sisters or cousins. And there are lots of wonderful nutrients in that carotenoid family, things like lutein and zeaxanthine, which we find in dark green leafy vegetables, but in our red vegetables, particularly tomato, very, very high in what's known as lycopene. It is released more efficiently when we cook the tomatoes, although cooked tomatoes are acid forming. One of the ways to make this dish more alkaline forming and to sweeten it naturally is we're going to add a whole bunch of carrots. Well, not quite a bunch, we're going to add 5 or 6 carrots, and we add a nice big sweet potato, and that sweetens the tomato soup naturally without, normally people go and add sugar to the tomato soup, and I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be adding sweet potato. Let's just pop this into the stove, into the hot pot. Okay. See, this pot is nice and hot, so what we're doing here is searing these tomatoes, and it does give it a very nice flavor. Kind of a roasted tomato soup, but this is the shortcut. Instead of roasting it in the oven, we sort of roasting it in the pot because it's so hot. You can see how nice and golden brown the tomatoes are coming out just from this nice hot pot like this, and I'm going to let that simmer a while I add some more tomatoes. We're actually not doing a lot of recipes. This is going to be the only recipe, and the reason for that is we've been trying to get fit the information that I had on asthma for some weeks now, or some months, onto the DVD, and there's just never any space. And so Marcus told me to just keep the cookery side of it short this week, and next this month, Marcus asked me to keep the cookery section short this month, and from next month we'll be back to doing 2 or 3 recipes. So, but this is a really spectacular recipe, worth being here on its own because it's so simple and yet so delicious. This is basically what I call dry stir frying as well. If you've read any of my recipe books, I talk about dry stir frying. This is basically what dry stir frying is. It means there's no oil or water in the pot. Now this recipe doesn't actually need any water at all. All the water is going to come from the tomato. And the plate is on high. And I'm going to let that simmer a while. And to that we're going to add a tablespoon or a lid full, that's what I usually do, of our vegetable stock. This is a veg stock that contains no sugar, no oil. It's got natural sea salt in it. There are no preservatives, no additives. It's just vegetables and seasoning and some salt. And I'm going to basically add that much. That's probably a tablespoon. And about a teaspoon or two of our garlic and herb salt. If you don't like the garlic and herb salt, or you're not sort of keen on the garlic too much, then what you can do is add a bit of the seasoning salt instead. The seasoning salt is a different flavor. It's got nutmeg and paprika and pepper in it and no garlic in it. I also like to add just a twist of black pepper. Oh, you can see the juices are just starting to sort of come out of the tomatoes now. It's wonderful to just see that simmering along like that. And this is optional. I'm going to be adding some chili. These are 2 chilies out of our garden, our own organic chilies. Again, as I say, this is optional. You don't have to add it. It's just gives it you don't want it to be too hot. You just want a sort of subtle bit of a bite to it. I'm going to be adding 5 carrots. You can add more or less. The carrots also help to sweeten it. They help to give body to the tomato soup. And all of this is going to be blended up, so it doesn't really matter what size it is. And then to that I'm going to be adding a sweet potato. Now the sweet potato thickens the tomato soup naturally. Instead of a lot of people add sort of flour and stuff, and then they're going to add sugar, and it doesn't make any sense. The sweet potato really gives a wonderful flavor to this tomato soup. And we're just going to add that all in there. And that's basically the soup, and we're going to simmer that until the potatoes are nicely done, probably about an hour. I'm going to turn this down. You can see all these natural juices that have come out of the tomato now. I'm going to turn it down to low and pop the lid on, and we're going to be back in about an hour. Now when it's finished cooking, and you can see here how all the delicious juices have come out of there. There's no actual water added here at all. And you're probably not going to have to add any fluid at all. You could, if you wanted to, eat the soup just like this and have a chunky tomato and vegetable soup, but I'm going to blend it all up together. And you'll see that all the pips and the seeds and the skins and everything, even the skin from the sweet potato, blend together beautifully. So we're going to take this across here to the blender. And we'll add all this delicious soup into the blender. And off we go. Here we go, and then we serve it. You can reheat it if it's cooled down. You can freeze this beautifully, but how I like to serve it is just a swirl of olive oil, and you can put a bit of fresh parsley. I've added a bit of chili, so I quite like the fresh coriander on there. And there we go.